Hey team, this is the first in many videos training on the SCR 310 contract document, or otherwise known as the purchase and sale contract that we all use to get these transactions done here in South Carolina. And obviously this is a very important document. It's the main driving document that we use on a monthly basis, and it's 9 pages long. It's got many paragraphs, a lot of detail, a lot of content. So what my goal is through these training videos is to do an individual video for each section of the entire document. The document has roughly 32 to 35 sections in it. So by the end of this series, we should have about 35 different videos for you guys to be able to access at any given time. So I'm really excited and looking forward to getting this done. Today we're going to go over the beginning of the contract, which is section 1. So we want to start right here. So with the parties, you obviously have lines for any and all buyers and sellers. So there's some specificity here that you definitely need to be aware of. Whichever buyers are going to be listed here are the actual buyers that are going to be financing or actually purchasing the property. So whoever is going to be paying for or financing, whoever's on the loan or the mortgage application, those folks need to be on this buyer line, which could be very different from who is going to be on the deed. So just for an example here, to go back about 8 years, I had a listing, and the eventual buyers that won the multiple bid scenario, their parents were going to be purchasing the house for the son and the daughter-in-law. They were moving here to start the hospital residency program, and so the father and the mother were actually on the buyer line. The son and his wife were going to be on page 2 on the deed line because they weren't buying it, but they were going to own it outright. So just as an example there, the folks that are on page 1 could very well be different to the folks that are listed on page 2 under the deed section. So I just want to make that distinction. Most of the time, obviously, 99 times out of 100, the people that are listed here are going to be the same as those that will be on the deed. But I do want to differentiate. There are instances where it could be different. So another highlighted point here is you want to make sure that the buyers on this line have to put their full legal name as is what's on their driver's license, which is going to be the same requirement for these folks as they fill out their mortgage application and mortgage documents. So that needs to be the full legal name here for the buyers. The sellers, this needs to be listed exactly the same way as it's listed in the tax records. So as an agent, you're going into the CRS software, you're pulling up the property, you're scrolling down a little bit and seeing who the owners are and seeing how it's listed. So you need to, if it's got middle initials for the husband and the wife, you need to make sure that it's listed the same exact way. If it's joint tenant with right of survivorship, or however any additional notations are in the tax records, you need to make sure that this is listed the same way. One extra little point here, if you go into the tax records and you see the list of 2 or 3 names, and then at the end you see the phrase et al. Et space al. That means there's actually more people on the deed than what they can fit online. So we can go over this in a CRS training video, but if you see that when you're trying to fill out the seller names on here, if you see et al, you need to be able to go into actually read the digital deed on the county website to see exactly how many people have ownership on that property. Here's a good example. Here's a story probably about 6 years ago. One of our agents listed a property that ended up having 9 relatives that all had ownership on it. So you can imagine that closing conference room was jam-packed, standing room only. But we had to have everybody on here, and everybody had to sign, and so it was a lot of fun, and it took a long time. But anyway, if you see the phrase et al, you need to be doing deeper digging in the deed to read through on that first paragraph in the deed how many people are actually owners on the property. The second half of the section 1 is just definitions. So we'll just read through them real quick. Parties defined as either buyer or seller. Parties defined as both buyer and seller. Brokers are licensed South Carolina brokers in charge. They're associated real estate licensees and their subagents. Closing attorney is the licensed South Carolina attorney selected by buyer to coordinate the transaction and closing. So about 2 years ago, they actually added this line just in case the closing attorney is different than the escrow agent or the attorney office or escrow agent that may be a different attorney than that which is closing it. So they added that line just in case the closing attorney is different than the escrow agent. Effective date, the final date upon which a party to the negotiation places the final and required signatures and or initials and date on this contract and delivers notice to initially cause this primary contract to be binding on all parties. Good funds is the transfer of the required amount of US dollars within any required time frame. Time, all times stated shall be South Carolina local time, which could be very important with the number of folks moving from all around the country and from different time zones, and internationally for that matter. So you definitely want to pay attention to this one when you're in the middle of a deal. Time is of the essence with respect to all provisions of this contract stipulating time, deadline, or performance periods. These are some newer items here that I'm very glad that the Forms Committee added. This one has been here for a while. If the buyer or seller is a South Carolina real estate licensee, they have to check that. That's been a disclosure section for quite some time now. But this next part here is very new. I think it just came in about a year ago. But it is nice to know this. So for both the buyer and the seller, they have to initial off verifying that they are either a client or a customer in this transaction, which is nice because in the past we didn't know. Closing attorneys never asked. Nobody ever verified. So for instance, if you are a listing agent and you have a co-op compensation listed on the MLS for 3% commission going to a buyer agent, so someone that has a client level relationship. In some instances, for a customer or transaction broker or TB compensation in the MLS, some agents are doing less than 3% or less than the buyer agent commission just because they have the higher chance of having to do more of their work during the transaction to make sure it gets closed. So some listing agents are offering less to a transaction broker, which is obviously the new phrase for customer service in a transaction. So in the past, we didn't know who was going to be a client and who was really a customer. So this is nice because the buyers and sellers have to verify via initials here. All parties have to initial of what their status is with their agent that's representing them. So anyway, that is the end of section 1, and we will move on to section 2 shortly. Thanks for watching.